Hey guys, it's Alexandra. Today I'm going to be talking to Mayor Patrick Ruyan from the city of College Park. He is kind of going to be bringing this whole coronavirus thing onto a more localized scale for us and talking about how city officials are working to keep us safe. He's also going to be giving some advice on what you should be looking for in a candidate as election day approaches. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe for more. All right, thank you.
So my role in politics, I'm mayor of the city of College Park in Maryland. I've been in that role now nearly 5 years. It'll be 5 years in December. And before that, I was on the city council in College Park for 8 years. College Park is a city of about 33,000 people. Located in Prince George's County, just outside of Washington, D.C. And we're the home of the flagship campus of the University System of Maryland, the University of Maryland in College Park. Being a university community, this year has been challenging, very interesting. I mean, it's been interesting and challenging for everybody, of course, but we have unique challenges as a university community in working with this population of there's approximately even though our city's population is only 33,000, our daytime population grows to nearly double that when we have the faculty and staff come into the city. About half of the students at the University of Maryland live in College Park, so we have the other half that come in to town. And the city is pretty densely populated during the day. It's also just generally populated densely with students, with about 10,000 students that live on campus and about that many, the same number that live in off-campus housing. So when the pandemic hit in March, we very quickly saw the city become empty. And everybody left, and the timing of the pandemic striking was such that spring break was coming up very quickly for the university, and what they decided to do was first extend the time for spring break to 2 weeks because they were trying to figure out what was going to be happening here, what they were going to do for the rest of the semester. And during the intervening time from when they announced that to when the students left, they just said basically, students that are leaving, don't come back. Take all your things with you. If you're in, and then a lot of students, it happened so suddenly that a lot of students had to leave their stuff in most of their stuff in the dorms. And had to come back and get it later. But they said basically stay where you are. They shut down the student housing almost entirely. They had about 70 students that were allowed to stay because they didn't have anywhere else to go. And the city pretty much emptied out. Now that obviously had a lot of impacts. It had a lot of impacts on our local businesses. It had a lot of impacts fortunately, it meant that that the coronavirus didn't hit us very hard here in the city because nobody was around. We didn't have a lot of cases in those early months. And it gave us a lot of time to figure out what we were going to be doing in the fall when the students returned. So we put together, there were several work groups that came together. We spent many hours in Zoom meetings trying to figure out how we would prepare for the students to come back in some level and exactly what that level of return that would be. So now we're in the fall semester right now, and when the students are back for some level of in-person instruction. It's about 15% of the classes that would typically be in person are now in person, and the student housing is reopened, but the students students have filled it to about 40% of their usual capacity on campus. I'll say for off-campus housing, A lot of people had signed leases already. They had their leases continuing from last year, had already signed leases for this year. So a lot of students just stayed on campus. Some students tried to get out of their leases. I signed a letter jointly with the president of the University of Maryland, Daryl Pines, encouraging property owners, landlords to be flexible and work with their tenants to allow them to get out of their leases if they don't feel that it's safe to return. I think some landlords were lenient, but also landlords themselves need to make an income, need to have rent in some way. So there was a lot of there was a real challenge navigating all those situations as well. But we also worked on putting all kinds of safety measures in place about how to make sure that students could return safely, that they could coexist with their long-term resident neighbors, and also to some extent patronize our local businesses in a very limited way, but also looking at how we could do it safely. And we've been fortunate, knock on wood, throw salt to your shoulder and all that. That so far we've managed to keep cases pretty well under control. Yesterday I was I looked at there's one of the trackers online. I forget the exact website, but one of the trackers online showed the comparison of the case numbers reported at the various Big Ten institutions. And Maryland has been consistently one of the lowest. So it's a testament to our community really coming together, really recognizing the seriousness of this moment, the importance of protecting ourselves, protecting each other, protecting our community, and taking steps to be socially distanced, to not get together in large groups like the students would usually be doing at this time, to be very cautious whenever they're out in public and interacting with their neighbors and colleagues and friends.
So a lot of the news that we see from day to day is about, what is Trump doing to manage the coronavirus and how is the country functioning, what's going on a national level. So I think sometimes it gets a little confusing to understand what type of leaders have the ability to solve which type of problems and like who is able to do what and what's being done on smaller scales. So how is problem solving kind of happening on a city level?
It allows you to be very, very granular and very focused on the specific conditions impacting our city. And we obviously there's a lot about our situation that is unique in College Park. The fact that so many people went away in the early months of the pandemic, that we were able to prepare for the return in the fall. Also, the fact though that we have these businesses that do rely very heavily on the students, and we were able to think about what we can do to help them out. I should mention we take our guidance from the Prince George's County Health Department. We don't have in our city staff, we don't have health experts. So in terms of what is safe, what is going to be the pace of reopening in College Park, that is all something that we take direction from the county. But we have been in very close dialogue with the county so that they're aware of the unique circumstances that we face here in College Park. So as they have been deciding when to allow people back into restaurants and bars, we've been raising the concern and the awareness of the potential of having large students crowding into bars. They've recognized that that's just not going to be safe. So putting specific measures into place. We have a challenge every year, even in good times. We have a challenge with overcrowding outside of our bars. That, for example, we have narrow sidewalks, and sometimes there's a risk for people spilling into the streets. It's simply just not acceptable for people to be crowded outside of bars when there's a pandemic. So reducing the capacity at bars raises the risk that people are just going to be crowding outside of the bar, waiting in lines, or what have you. So what we did is we worked with the bars and with the county to put into place a requirement that people reserve times, that people call ahead, and really limited the crowding that might otherwise be occurring outside of bars. We also have county health officials that do regular spot checks at within the bars and restaurants to make sure that for the social distancing restrictions that they have in place, where they have to be at very limited capacity. They have to have the table 6 feet apart. Everybody has to be wearing masks when they're not eating or drinking. If they don't follow those requirements to the letter, and they're caught by a county health official, they can be shut down and have been shut down on occasion for multiple days or even weeks, as to make sure that they get the right restrictions in place. So we've been working very closely with our county health department to implement those requirements. We also, the city of College Park, even though we don't set the rules, we're not the ones figuring out how limited you have to be in how far apart people have to be and all that. But we are in charge of enforcing the restrictions that the county health department comes up with. So we would usually have, especially at the beginning of the fall semester, students like to get together and party, and especially if they haven't seen their friends. We have a challenge with large gatherings, often creating a lot of noise. We made clear with the students very, very early on that was not going to be acceptable this year. That the usual things that they do in the fall, get-togethers, the large parties, the frat parties, all the sport teams oftentimes like to have their celebrations. That just wasn't going to be possible. So we put the county set the restriction of one person or family unit. Really, with students, you're just talking about people and not families. That there can only be one person or family unit per every 200 square feet of space inside of the house on a property. So if you live in a house at 1,600 square feet, you can only have eight people on your property, inside or outside, at any given time. Now, that's a pretty strict restriction, and we also increased the fines during the course of the pandemic. If you're doing something that's risky to the health or safety of the community or your neighbors, you can get up to $1,000 fine. And that really resonated with the students, in part because they don't want to get a fine. There's also academic sanctions that they could face through the Office of Student Conduct, and they've been generally very good and complied very, very closely with those rules. In some cases, it's even been the students that have been the ones calling. The city set up a 24-hour hotline for people to call about people violating coronavirus restrictions, and in some cases it's been the students calling in because they also feel they also feel concern about their own health, the health of their neighbors, the health of their friends, the health of their professors, their people that they work with. So the students have really stepped up and recognized how serious the situation is.
So I think one challenge of this pandemic is that the regulations and enforcement of policies differs from state to state and from city to city, and everybody's doing things a little bit differently as far as like rules and precautions. And I think that has created a lot of political division. And I'm wondering, how do you think we can kind of reset that tone and create a more united and cohesive front to solving this problem?
What's really helped with us is just a level to which people are working together, and the extent to which people feel like it's really a team, that we're all playing our part, having all these meetings early on, coming together and setting the basic parameters out at the beginning, that this is a serious health crisis, that what we're doing here is protecting the health and safety of everybody, putting the science first as well, and letting the people who understand the health impacts of the virus. We did since we had the extra time to work things out too. I think the we had the time to really put the health the science first. We as a pandemic, the first couple months of the pandemic, I think not as much information was out as we got later on, so there was a chance to understand better what we needed to do to be safe. But putting that science first, and then having everybody come together around, okay, so we know what the restrictions are, we know what we need to do. Now, how do we come together and make sure that we do it? The partisan differences haven't appeared. Of course, College Park is generally a pretty liberal minded, progressive minded, democratic minded city. So a lot of the divisions that you might see elsewhere didn't appear for that reason as well. But it was also just we haven't gotten a lot of pushback, even from we would usually be getting a lot of resistance from the landlords. There was some grumbling on the part of the landlords when we decided to increase the fines. We put in place a fine. A requirement that landlords provide the names of their tenants whenever the city has concerns about a coronavirus-related violation taking place at the property. They grumbled about that. They threatened to sue us. So far, knock on wood, that they haven't. So there's always going to be some people that are grumbling, but for the most part, I think the landlords too also it's their safety too. I mean, they're part of the community as well. So everybody's come together pretty well.
Great. So the pandemic obviously plays a big part in education in College Park in particular, and in any city that is close to a university. But how is the virus bleeding into sort of other areas of the city, and how's it being managed, in other walks of life outside of education?
Well, so of course, we're in the context of being in the Washington D.C. metropolitan area. It's a pretty densely populated region with a lot of complicated politics. We have three different jurisdictions: Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. That all have their own ways of doing things. They have worked closely together. The governors of Maryland and Virginia and the mayor of Washington D.C. have been I think they were working more closely together at the beginning, because it seemed like they were almost in lockstep in terms of when they were putting restrictions in place, and that's not been as consistent as the pandemic has gone on. But we have there's the demographics of the region that have impacted things. This pandemic has very clearly impacted people of color, Black and brown people, especially immigrant populations in our region, more severely than it has white people. And we in College Park, I talked about, so our case count was very low, especially in the beginning. Still continues to be fairly low, but we are located next to two of the zip codes to the west of us. Are the areas of Hyattsville and Langley Park that have very heavily immigrant population. Those two zip codes have two of the highest case numbers in the entire state of Maryland. So that is something that we also need to be thoughtful about. The speed at which we open in Prince George's County, and we are following the lead of the county, as I mentioned before, has been impacted by that, because we have been hit harder. Our per capita count, per capita case count in Prince George's County is the highest in the state. So that has really impacted the speed at which we've been able to reopen.
So you seem to do a lot of planning and coordinating as far as the pandemic goes and how the city is managing it from day to day. What do you think more people should understand about city officials' role in managing this virus?
I think one thing is we, as much as we love to put the ideal policies in place, we do have limited authority in the city. It's only by working together with other stakeholders that we can be successful. So I hear people criticize the partnership that we have with the university. They say that sometimes the city is too beholden to the university and what the university does. But we do have to work in partnership with the university, because the university is it's a massive thing. It's our main employer. It's the main thing that drives the economy of our city. So if we're not working together with the University of Maryland, we're not gonna be successful in addressing the needs of our community. We also this region is very interconnected in many different ways. So what we do in College Park, what people do in other cities around the region, and the other jurisdictions, even DC and Virginia, that impacts what we do here in College Park. So, and what happens here in College Park. So we need to work in a very coordinated way, and we can't always. People may think, you know, the best that right here in College Park we need to just be looking out for ourselves, but that's not going to work when people travel across our borders all the time. When our municipal boundaries don't even play that much into the mind of most people. So how we whether we succeed or fail depends on how well we work together with everybody around us.
So if any residents feel like they're not being represented or that the pandemic could be managed better in your city, how can they step up and get involved in the decision-making process?
We have a lot of different ways that people can be involved in College Park. We have resident committees and boards and civic associations that have an active voice within the city. I really encourage people to get involved with those things. I myself come from an organizer background, so having done work in the environmental movement, in the LGBT civil rights movement, and now my day job is with is doing advocacy around bike trails and active transportation. So I recognize that people, when they organize, when they come together around a common purpose, then the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that they can have much more of an impact and much more of a voice when they're working together. So finding like-minded people within the community that feel, if they feel an important issue, whether it's about transportation and getting more accessible transportation in the area, whether it's getting recreational amenities, whether they need new parks or what have you. If they find like-minded people in the community and they work together, that will help amplify their voice.
So as we know, voting is quickly coming up for the presidential election, and I think it's very important to know from a politician's perspective what citizens should know and consider before they vote.
It's a good question. I think these are really challenging times that we're facing in the country for many reasons. The coronavirus is one of them, but we also the country is very divided right now. You know, we talk about it a lot. The way that politics has played into things like the coronavirus response around the country, really distressing. And the fact that even something as simple and basic as wearing a mask right now is a political flashpoint is distressing. I think, to me, what I hope people will do is they have when you're in politics, people often identify with a particular label, often with a particular candidate, and they will vote for that label, that candidate, that party, time and time again, and become sort of trapped in a cycle of just being very like an echo chamber, like where they hear what they want to hear from that party or person that they identify with, and we all fall into that trap. But it's important to also be open to other perspectives. And I think as somebody who's generally fairly liberal and progressive minded, I for me, I know who I'm voting for. Definitely, I've already voted actually, and submitted my ballot last week. But when thinking about who should be leading our country, I want somebody who's also willing and able to listen to the voices of those people that may not necessarily be voting for him or her, to consider the perspectives of those people who are not in that person's base necessarily. There definitely are reasons why Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and because there are some people that felt that I think felt they were not heard or listened to within the current political structure. Whether it's certainly debatable whether Donald Trump was listening to them himself, but it shows that the recovery that we've had in the United States has been very uneven. There have been a lot of people that have been left behind, and it's people of color communities, but it's also rural communities. And I think that's whoever is leading our country. One way to kind of get beyond these current political divisions is, I think, to recognize the legitimate grievances that are being brought forth on all sides.
So, unfortunately, this year has brought a lot of challenge and negativity to politics, and I'm wondering what are some positive things that residents of your city can look forward to?
So there's a lot going on that's really exciting right now in College Park. It's very easy to get caught up in the pandemic and everything, and all the Black Lives Matter issues and all the attention that exists right now. But we are in the midst of a boom here in College Park that I think is just being put on hold right now for the pandemic. But once we're out of this, we'll start up again. And construction is continuing in College Park. Our city hall is we have a new city hall under construction right now that's still scheduled to be done, to be completed fall of next year. We have one of our first major new non-student multifamily residential buildings, which is going to have about 70,000 square feet of retail in a large public square being built right in downtown College Park. We have a lot of new student housing coming in the horizon, which will help support our local businesses, will help bring our local businesses back. I predict that we'll have an even greater diversity of businesses in College Park. One thing that was kind of neat was that my husband and I have been doing a lot of carry out during this pandemic. We have been trying to go to different restaurants every week, and we post pictures of our carry out up on Facebook and highlight the restaurants that we're going to, so that people can know what restaurants are open, what food they can get at various restaurants around College Park, and bring and eat safely at home. And it took us about 5 months of eating carry out maybe 2 or 3 times a week that we didn't have a single repeat before we actually had to go back to a restaurant that we had already been to. So there's a great diversity of businesses in College Park. A lot of our businesses are going to stay open. The community has come together, and unfortunately we're going to lose some. I mean, that's inevitable, but the community has come together and is supporting those businesses, and I think that's going to continue and even increase when we get out of this.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think people will have a lot to learn from what you shared, and hopefully reach out to more of their government officials to get connected and start making changes.
I appreciate the opportunity, so thank you for inviting me to do it.
All right.